Are you an esports photographer that's trying to level up your game and just don't know where to start? Go ahead and keep watching the video and I might be able to help you out with that. What's up everybody, my name is Sam, I'm a photographer based out of Tampa, Florida. I shoot sports and I shoot esports, so I've been doing it for a little while. I've been shooting sports for about 10 years and esports about 2, so I've learned a little bit along the way and I'd like to share some of that knowledge with y'all. Most of my videos are more talking to you. I don't necessarily have, oh, here comes the dog. I don't necessarily have all the ways to shoot a lot of B-roll or anything, so unfortunately, if you don't like this, I apologize. But what I do have here are a bunch of different cameras. So, as said, I shoot sports, shoot paintball, so some of these are paint stained, but they still work. This is the 1DX Mark II, 1DX, the 7D Mark II, film camera tossed in there, just have another one, and then GoPro and Insta360 action cameras. So, what are you doing? I have no clue what he's up to. But I wanted to talk about the difference of this. What I am filming on, by the way, is the R6, the Canon R6. I'm very much a Canon guy, if you couldn't tell, so keep that in mind. I'm only going to talk about my experience with the cameras with Canon. First things first, we all know, as a photographer, your job is to capture the moment, whether that is for you, or for the team, or for just anything in general, a league. You want to capture the moment. Hi, what's up? Okay, alright. 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 Down, back up, back up. Hey, back up, back up. The best way to capture that moment is not only to have the right gear for the job, but also to have the know-how on how to actually shoot, so that way you can properly capture the footage or pictures for the company or customer. The best way to actually capture that moment is not only to have the right gear, but it's also to have a good grasp of how to use that gear, so that way you don't miss the shot that you might never be able to take again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of the features that you might be looking for, as well as tell you how to use those features to better understand and better capture your moments. Here's what we're going to do. To get these out of the way, just as the basic starters, I want to get these out right away. GoPros or any kind of action camera, including the 360 camera, they are good as B cams, especially if you're shooting video. They're really good for things like that. They don't want to be your primary camera unless, for example, for this, you're vlogging. Otherwise, you don't want it to be your primary camera. You want your primary camera to be something that can handle it a bit better. So these are fantastic if you're trying to set them up as a secondary, put them in a smaller spot. They're amazing for that. Especially the Insta360s. These are amazing, just because this is the 362, but they're very small. Let me see how close I can get. That's a little hard for it to focus. There. So these are very, very small. And the good thing with these is, again, you can put them pretty much anywhere. You don't really have to worry about them being too big to get in. Every venue will allow them because they're so small. And especially, as I said, if your plan is to sit there and vlog yourself, it can't really go any better. I mean, you can, but not for the size. So that's what I would primarily use these for. I would not use these as your A camera. Another camera that I would say, unless you're very proficient with it or it's your whole thing, I wouldn't bring in as your A camera, is a film camera. I love this. It has an EF mount, so I can mount the regular lenses on it. It does take regular like camera batteries, the older fat babies things, but regardless, it's overall it's very nice. But again, it's unless it's your thing, I wouldn't go in there with the film camera only planning on shooting on that, just because you never know what you might miss, and it's not worth it at the end to potentially miss. Again, this is only if it's not typically what you shoot with. Okay, so let's go into the cameras that I actually would start to recommend. First things first, DSLRs. They stand, for those of you that don't know, DSLR stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. Older cameras, they were called just SLRs, Single Lens Reflex, and that was just basically a film camera, whereas now it's digital. It also uses a mirror as well, so it is limited in certain functions. The inside is also, it uses a mirror to reflect up everything into the viewfinder. It is very limited, though, I will say that. You can do a lot on DSLRs, especially a lot more than film cameras, but when it comes to certain things like video capabilities or picture quality, picture capabilities, they are limited. Not that they're bad, it's just the times have changed and there are upgrades. Some things that are kind of the rule breakers, not they're the exception, not the rule, is the sports dedicated DSLR. Not necessarily these, though I would argue that the 1DX Mark II itself, yeah, I've shot it in low light, so I know it can handle it, but still, at the end of the day, very limited. What I would really recommend, and I'll insert some B-roll here so that way you can see what I'm talking about, I would recommend a mirrorless camera. I'm going to explain why. So the very, very first thing, and the biggest reason I would say switching to a mirrorless or going mirrorless if you haven't yet bought one and you're just on the fence is I would start with the viewfinder. The regular DSLRs, they use, again, a mirror to the regular DSLRs, again, they do use a mirror to show the image in their viewfinder, whereas mirrorless cameras, without a mirror, it goes directly onto the sensor and then it displays an image in a digital viewfinder. So instead of optical, it's digital. What that allows it to do is it allows a lot more display, a lot more information on the display. It also allows you to, in real time, see how you see your exposure. So it saves you a lot of time and a lot of headache if you aren't quite used to your camera yet, of getting the shot and realizing it's too bright or it's way too dark. It very much helps a lot in that aspect. You're able to see it in real time, and that's just, there's nothing that can quite beat that. I was a hater for a while. I just loved my DSLR, but eventually when I switched to mirrorless, I realized that I was behind on the times and that I needed to go forward. That's not to say, again, DSLRs are bad. It's just for my specific use case, upgrading to mirrorless was a good choice. Another thing that they can do, one thing that a lot of cameras do, is the focusing is actually done through kind of the sensor more or less, well, with a mirror. So without a mirror, it's much faster with focusing. There is another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that, and that's because there is no mirror, it doesn't have to flap up every time you take a picture so it can put the image on the sensor, and therefore the shutter speeds are actually, the actual frame rate is much, much faster. So my 1DX shot, I believe it was 14, I don't remember the exact, it's been a few years since I used it, but I believe it was like 13 or 14 frames per second, which is fine. For most people, that's fantastic. But my R6 shoots 20. So right then and there, I'm guaranteeing less of an opportunity to miss a shot because I'm able to actually shoot faster. Now, you don't ever want to just fully spray and pray, but it is an option if there's a fast-paced movement in any kind of aspect of any sport, esport, that you need. It's worth having the extra burst just in case. Now, it might have seemed that at this point in time, I've been telling you all about the good of mirrorless and all the bad of DSLRs, but that's it. There's very much good things that go with DSLRs. I'm going to list a couple of them. I'm not going to go into all the details because a lot of it's very similar, but there are a couple things. First things first, for the same price that I can get this camera now, which is about $2,000, I got my R6. This one is by far has better handling, battery life, because the battery is bigger. Even though it's a bit older of a battery, it is significantly longer. Turn it sideways, boom, got the shutter right there. For what I'm paying for this now versus what I paid for my R6, ergonomically, this is just significantly better. Another really, really big thing that I kind of glossed over, but I know a lot of people do gloss over in general, is the mount. So mirrorless cameras, they have a separate mount than their digital DSLR counterparts. This uses EF, my R6 uses RF. EF lenses have been around since 60s, 70s, 80s. They've been around for a very long time. RF glass, last 5 years. So you can get adapters. It does slow it down. It does affect certain aspects of it when it comes to the not shutter speed, but the shutter speed, how fast you can shoot. It can affect It can affect the, not necessarily image quality, but the speed that it focuses. But they're native to this. Doesn't affect that at all. And EF lenses are significantly cheaper than RF lenses, simply because the RF mount is so new and they're made so good. I mean, they're such good lenses, but they are cheaper. So I can use a lens from 1985 on this, but I can't necessarily use a lens from 1985 on my R6 unless I get the adapter. So it's just an added expense that a DSLR wouldn't have. Another good thing about DSLRs is because the mount is so old, Canon and other manufacturers all make lenses for it. So you're able to buy Sigma or Tamron versus only buying Canon. I know they just recently opened it up for other developers to make different lenses, but it's very new and they're still going to be expensive versus, again, going EF, getting cheaper, or having to buy an adapter. Worst feeling in the world is realizing you forgot your adapter. It's something you never want to experience. So that's kind of some advantages versus disadvantages of the cameras. Okay, we're kind of at the end of the video. I've gone over the cameras, why they're important. I've shown you B-roll, I've talked over it. Let's talk about the technology, though. This is really what you need. You need to know the settings, you need to know how to shoot. You're shooting low light. It's hard. First thing I'm going to say, and it has nothing to do with your skill as a photographer, you're going to have noise in your photos. I hate it, coming from someone who shoots outside sports during the day mostly. I hate noise in my photos. It is what it is. Your job is to minimize that noise or be able to take the shot in a way that you can take out that noise completely. Again, it's hard. It's very, very hard, but it is possible. So let's go ahead and start with some settings that everyone should know. Your f-stop. What that is that's how wide your lens can actually open up to let more light in. That's one. Shutter speed. Obviously, that's how fast it takes the shutter to close and open, how much light gets let in. And third thing is your ISO. For your f-stop, you want it to be as wide open as possible. If you have a lens that shoots f4, shoot at f4. If you have a lens that shoots 2.8, shoot it at 2.8. If you can go wider, great. But shoot as wide as possible. It's dark in these theaters, in these convention centers. It's dark. They turn the lights off and they keep only lights on the gamers. They don't really keep them on the crowd. So you want to have that open as much as possible. ISO, it's hard. It depends on the camera. For something like this, I wouldn't have gone above 10,000. For something on my mirrorless, I regularly go to 15,000, and I'm able to still get the noise out. And I'll show some examples of some pictures. So keep that in mind. Depending on your camera, you're going to want to test the limits. You can even Google it. Half the time, these cameras have been out for long enough that people have been able to review them and post, hey, this camera's not good at 7,000 plus, stuff like that. So just figure out your camera. The last thing, shutter speed. You want to go as low as you can to the point where you can still capture movement, but not be dark. I find that my sweet spot actually tends to be around 1/250th of a second. For esports, there's not a lot of major movements. There is, but I'm still able to capture those movements without losing the quality. All this to say, at the end of the day, you want it to be as bright as possible before you, without having to mess with any settings outside of it. You don't want to have to edit the picture and up the exposure so much that you see a lot more noise get introduced. You want to try to minimize that right from the get-go. Another thing I would recommend looking into is see if your camera has IBIS. That's in-body image stabilization. And if your lens has it too, has IS, that's great as well. But a lot of lenses don't. So look to see if it has IBIS. A lot of mirrorless cameras, they do have IBIS. DSLRs generally don't. I actually don't know if any do, but I'm not going to talk on that because I don't know. But it helps a lot with keeping everything still while taking a shot. What it does is it actually stabilizes the sensor. So if it's moving, if your camera's moving, your sensor isn't. It's kind of the best way to put it. Our sensor is not moving as much, and it helps a lot with that movement. So just keep that in mind. So all this to say, after everything I've talked about, I think the choice is kind of obvious in my case. It's Canon R6, Canon R6 Mark II. It's going to the mirrorless line. Love my DSLR. It's still a very, very capable camera, but at the end of the day, it's so hard for me to justify it when I know that the capabilities of my mirrorless are so much better. Again, there's budget options. If you can't get an R6, which is what I have, I'm just saying that as an example, but if you can't get an R6, say it's $1,500 and you only have $800 to spend, there's nothing wrong with going with the 7D Mark II. It's more important to learn how to use your equipment than the equipment itself. I'm also going to say, in that same breath, which isn't true, I'm breathing right now, but in that same breath, people that say that it's only about the equipment and not about you, not about how you shoot, they're liars. It's true. I mean, don't get me wrong, great photographer can take great pictures with pretty much every camera, but having a better camera gives you that opportunity and the technology to capture better pictures. If I go out there with a point and shoot camera, I'm not getting the same picture as this. So just keep that in mind. You want to work with the equipment you have, you want to learn how to use your equipment, but if you are feeling like your equipment's holding you back, it's not it doesn't mean it doesn't mean it is, but it also doesn't mean it's not. It's just don't ever exclusively be like, well, it's the photographer, not the gear, because the gear does matter. It's just learning how to use it. You don't want to buy a camera and not know how to use it. So that's all I really have to say. There's not much more to it. I hope everyone enjoyed the video and learned a little bit about it. I'm still trying to put out a long form a week. I do have a series coming out soon, a photographer versus photographer kind of series, and I hope you all like that. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and end it here before I start to ramble too much. So y'all know what to do, like, subscribe, comment, and let me know what else you want to see. Ask questions. I'm here to answer them. I'm trying to do a lot more with this channel and showcase my skills as a photographer and teach people. So that's really all there is to it. So again, like, share, subscribe, all that. I appreciate everyone for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.